not carried as much by touch as by air. But I ain't taking any chances, you know. So I would say this is your copy. Nothing's on there. All that's been sanitized. So there, you know, that's where we spread it apart. Yeah, it has been sanitized. So it's apart. So as of about an hour ago, air conditioning went back off again. So fortunately, we got it back on. It's not full speed yet, but they're coming back Friday. They know what's going on with it now. It has 8 breakers in it, and one of them is when it gets to about, I told Janet a minute ago, they went up there and put a thermostat down next to the unit. It's 138, 48 degrees, you know. And it's just boiling up there. And if you can't get the air and the water through it, which one of the things is not, then it shuts down. So that's what's going on. But we'll do the first kind of 15 minutes on our outline, and then we will do our prayer guide. And so I noticed you're a little bit more forward this time, which means I can hear you. And so I haven't had the microphone up here. I just don't have it on, right? Okay. So we're just now starting for, okay, good. So thank you for being here. If you are online, we are grateful that you're here. I was just making note to those that are here that we have sanitized the copies that you have, and so they are sanitary, but do not leave them. They're yours, and either take them with you or put them in the garbage can when you leave. You know, again, we don't really believe that touch is as important as we originally thought, but we're not taking any chances, and so this is kind of where we are. Am I off the site of the online? Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm roaming around. All right, we're going to look at our outline. If you got it in front of you there, I got part of that outline put on our screen, so up here you can see the movements. This is one of the classic scriptures. It's a great scripture, and so no wonder I would jump on this and get to do it. I will tell you, I love technology, especially when it works. Today, I was just feeling so good. I'd taken about 45 minutes to go through and mark up my final copy, and I was rolling along, and I just can't tell you what great wisdom was pouring out of me. And I was writing notes, and somehow my finger hit something wrong in my iPad. I lost all my markings, just like that. So if I'm not as brilliant as I normally am, then just know that it was really there. I just didn't have it at the end. And I know you're all laughing, and you just can't see it behind your mask. So, okay. All right. This is Matthew 11, 16 through 19. I'm not going to take time to read the whole section, but I'm going to look at each small section. You're going to see it on the board. First section there is this generation. And so this generation, verse 16, to the children who refuse to play with each other. Now, I could not miss the incredible, obvious nature of that comment. They're speaking to a childish generation. And so the question I ask, and it's not that we'll answer it right now, but that I think I've answered it for myself at least, I could not help but think of the political climate of our time, children refusing to play with each other. Our political leaders refuse to work together even when some level of compromise would have a significant and a sustaining positive impact on our nation and on our world. God help us, and you can help by choosing not to be one of those people who just always goes around denigrating the other side. Amen. Verse 17, we played the flute for you, and you didn't dance. We mourned for you, and you didn't lament. Now, the writers, the commentators that I read, think this is a clear reference of John the Baptist on one corner and Jesus in the other corner. Now, why that might be likely is because, you know, the memory of John the Baptist was certainly in the people that were hearing this. And so what they're really thinking here is that John the Baptist came looking down on people, forbidding with a kind of uplifting personality. And so they're thinking that that's the reference point or the background of this. And then in verse 19, Jesus came eating and drinking and mixing with sinners,
And they said, behold, a gluttonous man, a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And you can't help but believe that as they began to talk about Jesus in those points, that he did not sense that they were ultimately going to get him. That ultimately you couldn't do what he did to religion and remain the same. Because they were threatening, he was threatening their very warm feeling of faith / superiority. Because to be a religious person in that day and time was to have a level of elitism about it. And so Jesus was coming along and taking a significant portion of that. So the question is, define what wisdom means in your life. Who do you consider to be the wisest persons in your life, and what can you do to develop wisdom in your life? Now, this is the one I had written quite a bit on, so let's see if I can remember. Wisdom in my life is, at the baseline, it's perspective. It's just being able to look at something and say, wait a minute, this is what I see, but let me take a step back and have perspective. Then it would be, if it involves a person, it would be, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. What I might think is not true. There was a moment today when I looked over at Karen, I said, I see somebody coming in. I have a history of that person. Long story, I won't go into it, but I immediately had a thought that I thought, here it goes again. And so came, and it was not what I had thought. And so, matter of fact, there was a significant improvement in this person's life, and they were bringing another person along with them for us to know about and to be able to help and invite to the church and those kinds of things. So you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. So the other word that I thought of was the word discernment. Through the years, discernment to me has just been crucial. And so the people, which leads to the next sentence there, who are the people in your life who you would perceive as wise people? Now, I have a number of people around me personally that are wise. I certainly consider my bride that. I certainly consider my staff in that realm. So I've got some people around me. I have a Tuesday group, guys. I think many of you know I used to meet with them in Nashville, but now because of Zoom, I'm being able to meet with them again. And by the way, the manager of Charlie Daniels has been in that group for a while, and so he was tragically, he was very upset this week. So what you have in all of that is just people who you let speak into your life, and along the way, there's going to be some wisdom come from them. Now, the people that I kind of lean into on social media are people like, there's an Episcopal priest in Nashville. I've never met him, but we kind of know each other from a distance, and he is a very wise man. And so next time I go to Nashville, I'm going to stop in and see him, meet him formally. But he says a lot of things. The youngest person probably that I lean into and listen to is a man by the name of Jonathan Merritt. And Jonathan is the son of a man that I went to seminary with. And it's very interesting to see how different he is from his father, but how much wisdom he speaks. And then probably the other one would be Beth Moore. I regularly read some of the stuff that she's written, and I have found her to be incredibly deep water. And so those are some of the people that are speaking into my life. So what do I do to develop wisdom? Well, I read, I listen. But if there was one word I kept thinking about, listen. We need to learn. If I could bless this nation right now, I'd say, stop talking, listen more. Listen more. And so instead of having the answers, let's listen to each other. Anything related there? I know we're a little closer. I might be able to hear you if you want to speak up. Okay, Matthew 11:25 through 27. Again, I won't take time to read all of that section, but we'll break it down into little pieces. In verse 25, Jesus addresses God as Father, and Lord of heaven and earth. Now, the imagery of heaven and earth could easily be seen as the transcendence of God, heaven, and the immanence of God, the fact that God is present. And so we're just now beginning, we're getting to understand what that third part of the Trinity will mean later. But here, I think the writer in Matthew is certainly implying that. And then the next slide you'll see, God has hidden the truth from the wise and understanding, verse 25, but has revealed the truth to infants. Now, what does that mean? I suspect that there's a part of the worldly wisdom and the worldly understanding of things that he's talking about here that doesn't apply. And how many people do you have known? And churches are notorious for this. We will invite the wealthiest person typically to serve on our boards or our teams or whatever, because we assume that a wealthy person is smarter, is wiser. And I hope you know that's not always the case. And so particularly, there are people that they know one segment of life and they don't have the big picture. And so I've had folks on my finance team before who only knew how to add 2 + 2 = 4 and had no sense of faith or spiritual things. And so I needed that person in that. I wanted somebody to certainly hold us accountable for the money. But if you don't have any vision for how God spends his money and how he has an economy that's a little different than 2 + 2 = 4, then it always falls a bit short. The infants there is he's just implying that infants have this kind of, hey, they're just hanging out. They're with us. The other day we went by to see Cassandra. We got to hold Ivy. Ivy had no idea she was being held by me or Neva because she was in her zone, her sleeping zone. And so wouldn't it be nice if we all could kind of live in that comfort zone? Now, the question we ask, Jesus' optimism is based not on any recent success, but rather on God's gracious authority and the intimacy between father and son. So why does the intimacy between a father and a son matter? And what does that mean for the intimacy in our relationship with Christ? Well, if we didn't think God the Father had sent Jesus, what would it matter? He wouldn't matter near as much. What would we think if we didn't think, but we didn't believe that we could have, just as he has intimacy with the Father, that his sacrifice allowed us to have that same kind of intimacy? So, anything related there you want to ask about or talk about? All right. Verses 25 and 26. That you hid these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for so it was well-pleasing in your sight. It seems the more that Jesus appeals to those who are on the edges of society, the more that society people seem to reject Jesus. And so it's kind of one or the other. If you want to include one, it kind of closes the door on others, and vice versa if it goes. So the question I ask is, the hard truth of the gospel is this: it can be good news for the rich and the powerful, but it is far more difficult for people with great personal resources, whether wealth or genius, to admit their need for Christ. Christ blesses the humble, the supplicant, and it is difficult for the rich and the powerful to either be humble or receptive. How wealthy are you and me? So 2 things here. A friend of mine sent me an article by the man that I'd seen on news a couple times. He's a doctor. I think he was professor of medicine at Harvard, real bright guy. I'd never connected the two, but actually he's Dr. Fauci's boss. And so they're both just brilliant guys medically. And I didn't know much about him. I just had seen him. And so what I found out was not only is Dr. Fauci's boss, but he entered medical school as an atheist. And he says, I came out of medical school as a Christian. And so the person interviewing him asked him why, what happened? He says, well, I don't believe you could be around medicine and see what impact faith has on people's lives and still believe that 2 + 2 = 4 in every medicine situation. So and I'm probably going to do more about reading about him. I pulled that article aside now. I put it in my reading pile. But isn't that wonderful that somebody that brilliant that has taught? And so all these years he's been teaching, he's always had a faith element to everything that he believes about medicine. So verse 27, it's kind of a thunderbolt because it reflects Jesus' prayer from John 17 rather than Matthew. And so Jesus prays, all things delivered to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, neither does anyone know the Father except the Son, and he to whom the Son desires to reveal him. So there's that dynamic. I referenced it on Sunday as being that part of the reading in the lectionary that is kind of theology 301. It's a thick kind of belief in what we call the incarnation or the Trinity. So you're seeing the connectedness of the Father to the Son. Matthew 11:28-30. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. This is kind of the fun part of this. And I put these verses in a form that you could read them together because I wanted you to see the flow and at least have a look at the Greek literal translation. It says, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle. And there's the Greek, meek or humble there, and lowly. And the Greek is humble and lowly. So they're doing a kind of a play off each other. In heart, and you will find respite, if you would, for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So let me ask you the question, when was the last time you felt burdened? And was it due to your own expectations, or rather to the expectations of God? How did you overcome, is what I meant to say, overcome that burden? Well, let's unpack that a little bit. We can be burdened for the right reasons, and we can be burdened for the wrong reasons. The right reasons to be burdened are to be burdened about people that are far from God, burdened about our country, burdened about the struggles that people are having. Those are good things to be burdened about. Now, if those burdens, if you carry, as a pastor, if I carry everything I hear and see all the time, I will be a very burdened person. But if I am a conduit through which I offer to God the burdens that I feel and sense and I see in the congregation, then obviously lots of good things can happen. So there are some things that I need to be burdened about, but I want to make sure that I define the expectations that God has for me to be burdened. The things that matter to Him matter to me, and then the things that matter to me that may not matter to God. And if I'm burdened about those things, then maybe I need not to be burdened. So there are some things in our lives we don't need to be burdened about. But what's that, honey? Well, I don't need to be burdened about the fact that if we don't get our third bathroom done on such and such a date, we're renovating we have 2.5 baths in the house, and so you can get our contractor didn't do this or our contractor didn't do that, and you can beat your head against the wall. Guess what? He's still going to show up when he wants to. I don't know if or not sometimes. And so there's some things that you and I cannot, even as much as we'd like to shake some sense into them, there's some things we cannot change. But we can be burdened about people, again, being far from God and how we might be able to connect with them. I mean, I can be burdened about the fact that, I wonder how many donuts they'll have left at Moonrise tonight when I leave. And as my friends, I was on a Zoom today, and they said, well, I can't wait to get back to Moonrise. I said, it's open, don't you? And they said, oh, yeah, But, I said, well, they have outdoor seating. And I said, yeah, it'd be a great thing to have a donut and sit outside in 95-degree temperature and watch it melt. And so that's also true. So those are some of the things about burden. Anything about burdened? Okay. All right, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And see, Jesus doesn't propose here that we go what we call yokeless, and that sounds a little bit funny, but we accept the yoke that he is placing on us. We talked about that Sunday, that it is manageable, that yoke that he is, in other words, he's standing there, one side of the yoke is open, and he wants us to come and join him. So the question that I ask is for a contemporary analogy. Consider the advantages of new high-tech athletic equipment. The more we can put our, situation, our goals, to the equipment that produces our needed outcomes, the better chance we have to realize or manage those goals. What goals do we have? So when Jesus invites us to take his yoke, to learn from him, it is as if he's giving us access to the finest equipment that was ever given for spiritual growth and the best coaching for the game of life. So how does technology allow for this more than ever before? Well, as I talked to you about a minute ago, my iPad. I love my iPad. I can look at multiple translations of Scripture really quickly. It allows me to do a lot of things that I couldn't do with my paper version of the Bible, but there are those moments when, guess what, it just kind of disappears. If you go and look at my paper Bible, the one I've used all these years, the pages won't hardly come apart. They don't come apart anymore. They're just kind of stuck together because they've been moved and written on so much. And then the final section there, for I am gentle, there's that word, and lowly in heart. And Jesus promises that we, in fact, will inherit the earth. That's from an earlier passage in Matthew. And then you will find rest. There's that great rest for your souls. And then you identify as what we would call a temporary rest to refresh for the work that, in fact, lies ahead. In other words, how many times is it necessary to sit down and take a rest? What Neva and I have noticed that if it's our feet that we need to rest, not just our, kind of our breathing, that the feet do not want to get up. That if you really worn out your feet, you can redo your breath, but your feet are done when they're done usually, if you've experienced that. So back to, while the original context of burdens referred to the Jewish law, there is nothing in these words to suggest that these burdens should not also apply to our weariness and the worries today. So we are weary today even though we do not carry the weight of the Jewish law. Name some of the burdens that you and I bear today. Now, I hope you'll do that. We're kind of at the end of our teaching time, but I hope you'll do that. What are the burdens that I have that I need to have? And what are the burdens that I have that I don't need to have? And to try to make a distinction between those. No doubt. Yeah, let me just repeat it. Yes. Yeah, and let me repeat what Neve was saying for the camera, and that is, there is so much fear that lingers in the air right now because of the COVID, and fear about lack of understanding, and fear about misunderstanding, and fear, all those things wrapped into one. So my goal is simply, let's try, every segment of my life, let me try to be the best version of an appropriate kind of fearlessness. Not, oh, I'm not afraid. I hope you haven't heard of this, but there was a party, a Christian party at a church. They called it to kill the COVID devil. And so they literally went there and danced and sang and did all the things that you really shouldn't be doing. And, of course, one little lady, 16, 15 years old, got sick and died. And I'm just telling you, my heart just breaks for that kind of thing. And so while her mother is saying she was a martyr, I don't have nice things to say about her mother right now. I just don't think that should have happened. Anyway, everybody has their own faith experience. So Jesus' concern for burdens is just as real as the concern for the law-burdened Jews of the day, and his promise is, come to me, all who labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Okay? All right, let's look at our prayer.